Hello, and welcome to the VFX breakdown of Distant Encounters. If you're watching this, you probably donated money to the crowdfunder for the short film to get the short film made. So thank you so much for that. This film would not have been possible without your support. And yeah, we're not going to be taking a look at every single VFX shot in the film. There's about 20. We're just looking at 4 or 5, and we're going to look at some of the main ones and some smaller ones. And yeah, I'm excited to show you guys a little bit of the behind the scenes of how we accomplished some of these shots. So yeah, let's get into it. The first shot we're going to take a look at is Max's dad being abducted by the UFO beam right here. So this is how this first shot looked originally when we filmed it. We filmed this on the last day of shooting. This is at a park in Syracuse, about a mile from my house, maybe even a little less. And Sharif, right here, met us after filming all the kitchen and basement scenes at my house in Syracuse at like 1:30 in the morning. Me, who I'm right here, my assistant director, Maddie, producer, Aurora, and cinematographer, Derek, brought the harness, cable, the camera and tripod, and a big battery-powered orange light and stand into the woods. And we got this shot because the first day when we were supposed to shoot, when we shot all the wood scenes, the generator broke and it was like freezing cold and late at night. We didn't have time to get it. So now that you have a little bit of background on this, to get started with this, the reason why we did this was to make it look like Sharif was floating and in the same lighting and environment. If he was standing on something, it wouldn't look like he was floating. So that's why we went with a harness. And I was his counterweight over the branch right here. And real quick, it's obviously pixelated, this footage. I had to, the other shots that we break down aren't as pixelated, but there's just so much data that I had it rendering on low res when I was going through this. But to take a look at this first clip, let's start to go through. So the first thing to do is to cut Sharif out. So to do that, I basically duplicated the layer and then made a point click with a pen tool around each part of his body, one around his torso and head, his legs and arms, for every frame of the shot. So if it's about a 2-second shot, 224 frames per second, about 50 times. I think it was a little over 2 seconds. So I think it was like 70 something frames or something. Just clicking through because his hands move a little bit, his foot moves a little. Going through that, do that for every frame. And then we grab a clean plate. So everyone runs out of the frame, or we did this before we ran into the frame. Don't move the camera at all. Get a clean plate, a clean background. Why? So we do that so I can throw that cutout of Sharif onto this clean plate. And now the lighting matches up and it looks like he might be floating in that scene. Also, real quick, I forgot to mention, this little dot right here is where Sharif is at the beginning of the clip, and the line going upwards to that other dot is where he is at the end of the clip. So that's just how he moves up during the scene. So the next thing to do is to duplicate that layer and add a shadow. So I duplicate this layer, just make it black and feather the edges to be softer so it looks like a shadow. Then go ahead and add in the orange glow, the first part of the orange beam. So this is a multi-layer thing to make the beam look like some texture. The first thing to do is to just get an orange solid, draw a shape roughly like this, and then just make it really feathered and soft on the edges. And lower the opacity. And then after that, we do that again with more intensity and a little bit more shape, so a little bit less softness on the edges. It's a little bit of a more defined orange shape right here. Then go ahead and add a fractal noise. So a fractal noise is basically just a white and black texture of swirls that you can manipulate a bit, and this makes it look like smoke or maybe dust. It just gives the beam a little bit more texture. And the next thing to do would be to cut out the shadow to be just on this tree right here. And then here what I did is I added a particle effect where you generate some particles to move upward in 3D space. So these three things slowly move upward just to make it look like maybe some dust or some rocks are moving up, and kind of tied in the seam. I added a glow to the beam a little bit, make it look like it's interacting with Sharif a bit. There's some more intensity on Sharif. And then the final thing after that is to just color grade it, so which is basically just to push the contrast a little bit, push some orange color, and then there you have the final shot. And then it looks a lot better when the color grade goes on it. You'll see the last thing to add color really helps kind of bring everything together and give the film the right tone and mood. Another thing you'll notice is there's a little camera shake actually, and that's a fake camera shake, and all I had to do to make that was move the whole image up, left, right, down, up, just randomly to make a natural feel, and that just kind of helps ground the scene a bit more. And the next shot we're going to take a look at is the one of young Max, or Casty, finding Sharif, his dad, floating in this UFO beam. The shot right before the last one. So yeah, let's take a look at it. So this right here was probably the hardest shot in the movie, and the reason why is because it was really hard to get a good motion track, and I'll talk about that once we get to it. So this is the first clip. No footage or no effects or anything. The first thing I had to do was cut out Sharif's legs, and the way I did that was basically drew around his legs, and with software and manually taking clips from later in the video and patching it up over on top of his legs. So this is all actually, this tree is CG generated based on pixels of the camera moving. It guesses what was behind his legs, and it actually did a really, really, really good job. And then what I did is I went ahead and put his legs back into the shot. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to be able to just move his legs up just a bit. I mean, it's really not that noticeable, but it really helps subconsciously, I feel like. And the other reason is I wanted to change, when I throw the UFO beam in here, because we pull back, we start on a medium close-up of Cassie, and we pull back to this wider shot that introduces his legs and the UFO beam. The UFO beam would be covering his legs a different amount, so I had to change the opacity just on how much the beam is affecting his leg. The next thing, throw the beam in there. So I literally just copy and paste the beam from the last shot, make it bigger, put it right here in the frame. So after that, what I did is that's changing the opacity of how much it's interacting with the leg, right? Yeah, it's making it less on top of the leg. I also just want to note that opacity and how much the beam covers up the leg changes depending on how far back we are in the shot, how much of the leg we see. So then this right here is the track and with some particles. So bring the particles back in. How to change the size of the particles. But all these red squares right here, this is a motion track. So how this works basically is you pick a point on the screen and play the clip through. And let's say I picked this point right here, this button right here. As the camera moved, if the camera moves to the left, then this is going to move to the right. It's going to say, oh, these pixels are over here now. The thing is, there's not really any great pixels to track it. I must have tracked this thing 15, 20 times, picking different points in the scene. I just couldn't stay on it. It's too dark, basically. And finally, I found a spot. It's literally right underneath his earlobe. That was a high contrast point that mostly was able to get. I was able to tweak it manually by dragging the point to the right pixels. Yeah, finally getting that track really helped bring it together, because it looked terrible without it tracked. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is what that clip looks like without a track. See how when the camera moves in the beam, the opacity is ramped up in the beam. You can see the legs are moving up a little bit also. But see how the camera moves left, the beam moves left, when in reality it should be moving right. And it just doesn't look right. So now you'll see in this clip, it looks like it's embedded in the scene, because when the camera moves left, it moves right. It's not perfect, but it works. And the opacity on the legs hits a little bit different. You can actually see the cutout of the leg Right there, that line right there. Of course, this has the grade on it now. But you can see there's a little line. That's where the cutout is of the leg. The legs are slowly moving up. Now, if they weren't moving up, you'd notice that. You'd notice that. But they are. You don't really notice it that well. And yeah, so that was so hard just to make the beam look like it was really in the shot and playing with the opacity enough. So I'm ramping the opacity of the beam here, changing the opacity of how much the legs are being affected by it. And yeah, so that was the toughest shot in the movie for me. Since it was so hard to tie everything together because the effects don't start in the shot and they fade into the shot as we pull back. We literally go through the effect, and it was hard to make that look like it was embedded in the scene and really interacting with the camera and the objects in the frame. Next shot we're going to take a look at is this one right here of the machine glowing and ramping up. So first, just to talk about building the machine. This was fully done by Jack Reamer and Thomas Melkonian, two great guys. I'm in a fraternity at school, and they were pledging my fraternity, and instead of having them do stuff at the house, I said, hey, you guys want to crash at my place and build this machine with me for a couple days? And they're architecture majors, so they went into the architecture room. They laser cut plexiglass and hand cut wooden beams for this and spray painted this whole thing. I went to Home Depot, just bought random shit from Home Depot, and stuck it on this thing, glued it on, random wires, antennas. I don't even know what half this shit is, but yeah, that's how we built the machine. And then for the glowing part inside, that's just there's a nightstand lamp in there that has one of those LED light bulbs that you can like change the color on your phone and change the brightness on your phone. So someone's behind the camera playing with that intensity. And then right here, you can see Maddie, our assistant director and producer, with a metal rod, which is actually the metal rod that lights up on top of the house, which is just PVC pipe spray painted. And Maddie's hand is shaking the machine as someone off screen is making this brighter and brighter. So the first thing I did here was added turbulent displacement. So if you could take a look right here, the machine warps the air. So see how there's that warp? It's basically it's called turbulent displacement, and it's really easy. It just warps everything. I just draw a mask around the machine so it doesn't affect the machine. Next thing I did, cut out the hand. So all I did there is when her hand wasn't in there, copied that and threw it on top. So before she put her hand there, I got a shot of what that looks like without her hand, cut that out, and threw it on top. Then after that, the next thing to do was make this more intense, this brightness more intense. So all it is literally a blue, solid, flat image that cut out, change the opacity, and feather the sides to make it look soft. That's all it is, and it really goes a long way. And then the final color grade makes stuff look a little bit more intense and sci-fi. And then you got the final shot. Real quick, I'd actually like to point out, if you look right here, I don't think you really notice it on the first or second watch, but you can see the part that's covering up her hand is not affected by the turbulent displacement. If you look right here, see, it doesn't match up quite right. It's because it's covering up her hand. That's right where her hand is. But you can't really see it, so you can get away with it. Now this next VFX shot is a small one, just the machine smoking. Well, it's one of my favorite VFX shots in the film, just because it's simple and I think it came out good. So let's hop in and take a look. So this is actually a really small effect, but one of my favorite VFX shots in the whole film because I think it's one of the most realistic looking. And all it is smoke coming out of right here. So the first thing I had to do, track the footage, same thing, because it's a handheld shot, the camera moves a little, the camera pans down right. If you throw footage on it of smoke, it's going to move down to the right. So I have to counter that movement, basically. So, track the footage. This track wasn't too bad. Thankfully, it was bright enough to get a good track. Next thing you do, it's actually a cigarette against the black screen just sitting there smoking. And just cut out the cigarette, drag that footage, speed it up a little bit, take out the black, and then that's the smoke. And put one there, one there. Now, if you look a little bit closer here, I have to draw these masks that cover up and delete the smoke where the wires would be in the way, and change that opacity to make it look like, maybe it's wrapping around these pipes and wires. So, with all that set up, that's really all it is. All it is getting a good track, masking around it, and then getting a good color grade to make it look like there's really smoke coming out of there, and interacting with this light. I play with the brightness and contrast a little, but I'm really proud of how that came out. Finally, the last, biggest and most noticeable VFX shot, the house burning down. So this is actually kind of one of the inspirations of this entire film, is I just had this image of a house burning down that I had written in a few short films, all with different stories. I just knew I wanted to make a film that had a house burning down. For my senior thesis film, I'm thinking about what film can I make? Like, what's a film only I can make? And one of my strengths is VFX. I know a lot of my classmates don't have the VFX experience I was fortunate to have. So I've never done a shot like this, but I knew based on everything I've done, I could figure it out. And I had an idea of how I was going to do it. So the first thing we had to do was grab a shot of the house with a huge light on it. So we got a big ass light behind the camera right here. Camera's on tripod. Just blasting the house to make it look really bright. Then we grabbed a shot of, without moving the camera, a shot of the talent, the actors in frame. And this is important just to get the right lighting. They're still getting that silhouetted light. The light's coming from the house because we're shining that light in front of them, right? They're not being lit from behind, only from the reflection of the house, or the reflection of the light bouncing on the house onto them. So then after that, what I had to do was cut them out, because I just want them. I want to put that other shot of the house behind them. And that's really simple. It's literally just cutting them out like I cut out Sharif in the first shot, but I'm doing it for every frame. And the frame when they walk off screen, and the other shot of the house burning down when they walk off screen, it's just really tedious to cut them out for a couple hundred frames every frame, so that takes hours and hours. It's simple, but it takes a long time. And I actually, in making this VFX breakdown, noticed you can see the stand right there in terms of all the hours I spent on this shot. I didn't notice, but hey, even I have looked at this film more than anyone, and I just noticed it yesterday making this VFX breakdown. Anyway, the next thing to do after that is darken up the wood. This is one thing I actually didn't think about when I was first making it, but in the process, when it wasn't quite looking right, I had all the fire on there. I realized, if wood was really on fire, it'd be getting darker, it'd be getting burnt. So I just downloaded an ash texture and put it over the whole thing and just cut it out so it just looked like it was on the house. Then is the fire part. So this part is basically just a bunch of images and videos of fire filmed against the black screen. So there's just this fire right here that is like fire against the black. I'll throw some clips in, anyway, of the video of what these clips look like. And it's really just dragging them in and dropping them in, manipulating them a bit, maybe twisting them a little, lining them up, cutting out right here to make it look like it's in the window. Actually, there's glass right here, so it wouldn't really make any sense for fire to be going through glass, but you can't really tell, so it ends up working out alright. And you can see the fire's all different colors. It doesn't really look too great now. Bam, it's about evening out that color. Maybe if there really was this fire in the film, what would that quite look like? And I think for right now, that fire looks a little bit more true to color in this. And then, so this next part, this is very subtle, but this was probably the most important thing in tying everything together. If you look right along the outside of this mask, you can see the glow from the fire. You can see the glow from the fire around them. And that made such a huge difference. It's so subtle. But I spent about 2 weeks trying to figure out how to do that. Because I'm trying to get it to move with them. And it ended up being, I'm not going to get into it, but it ended up being a simple solution that I had to do about 4 other insanely complex things. I literally spent 2 weeks just trying to figure this out. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I finally figured it out. Sometimes you just got to try shit and realize it doesn't work to get to the right answer, you know? So after that, it's darkening the image up a little bit and also added that same displacement that came from the machine. I did the same thing, just made it a little bit more smaller and tighter to make it look like that heat, the way heat distorts the air from far away on a hot day. And then after that, I added optical flare. So I added a little flare right here and a little flare right here. That kind of, there'd be a lens flare if there was this much light coming at the frame, but just a little off screen. I have it flicker over time as well. And then finally the color grade, which just, again, makes everything way more intense. And we get that as the final shot. So, yeah, that is the breakdown. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope it was interesting. It was fun for me to talk about this. The way I learned how to do all this stuff was by watching other people make their own VFX breakdowns on YouTube and talk about it and walk through the effects. And it was fun to be on the other side of it for the first time. So, yeah, thank you again for supporting the film, and it really wasn't possible without you. And, yeah, that's all I got. Thanks.